muted.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to give probably another 2 minutes for any last-minute people logging in, and then we'll start. Thank you. All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for attending. This is Taxes and Technology and Taxes, Key Financial Strategies for Next Year. I'm Victor Liu, President of Link High Technologies. We have Greg Tompkins, who's partner at Ross CFO, and also Link High Technologies CFO. I'm just going to do a quick intro about Ross CFO, then I'm just going to turn it over to Greg. And then at the end, feel free to ask any questions. You could also email marketing@linkhigh.com if you have any additional questions that come up after the webinar. Greg is happy to take all those, and we'll send it to all the attendees. Well, about the firm, I'm just going to read it. At Ross CFO, Controller and Bookkeeping Services, we help our clients turn accounting data into a roadmap to business success, so they can focus on day-to-day operations and their organizational mission. Our work typically leads to deeper strategic conversations about improving growth, profitability, or turning around a struggling business. Find out more at www.raw-cfo.com. And here, I'll let Greg kind of go over his own background.
Well, hello everybody. I'm Greg Tompkins. Thank you for joining us today. A little bit about me. I've been accounting for over 30 years. Our business began in 2009. Prior to that, I was in public accounting for over 22 years. Had my own practice for a period of that time, and was part of a small local firm and a larger regional firm, and then ran a couple businesses and began this with my partner in 2009. So the agenda today, the topics we're going to cover are some year-end planning areas that are often brought up to us this time of year, mainly around taking advantage of some of the tax law in the area of immediately deducting the cost of purchase of assets at the end of the year. I want to cover some issues around business tax credits that are often overlooked or maybe ignored and not attended to, not taken advantage of by businesses that aren't doing anything unusual, but some of these have a broader application than often we think of. Then we're going to talk about year-end budgeting, looking at the budget for the next year, how to construct that, and how to create a capital budget, which is a separate item. And finally, we're going to focus a little bit on protecting our assets through a review of some of the cybersecurity issues that all businesses and individuals are facing today. So, basically, we're all looking to be profitable, to have bags full of money going into the new year, and hopefully everyone's doing well and will continue to do well in the coming months. So the first topic is, what is Section 179? People refer to this as the ability to write off assets that you purchase, be they vehicles or equipment, and it's an IRS code section that is often taken advantage of and is often extremely beneficial to tax savings for businesses, where they're getting a direct write-off from their income for items that they need and purchase in their business. So the type of items that can be expensed, they're not all items, but they are items that are typically of a personal, tangible nature, equipment, tangible personal property, tools, equipment for business, certain vehicles you're allowed to write off immediately, computers, and also off-the-shelf software. Oftentimes people forget to include this when they're looking to make these type of elections. Software is something, especially if it's a large item, that can be written off directly. And then office furniture and equipment. One of the items that's not on the list but is also something that is not often taken advantage of, there's even certain building improvements. If you're rehabbing a building, that also could qualify for some treatment, as could certain types of leasehold improvements. So an HVAC system could be a sample item of that, where it's part of the building structure. It's a very large item, and if you're required to replace that, you may be able to write it off in its entirety. So the limits have been changing, and they've been going back and forth. During the George W. Bush administration, they were expanded as a tax benefit to small businesses, where they could write off a much larger amount, and this was to try to spur the economy at that time. So the deduction limit was increased temporarily to $500,000 for a company that purchased no more than $2 million of equipment of this nature. If your company purchased greater than $2 million, you're not able to take the benefit of this, but you will be able to take the benefit of something we're going to speak about in a little bit. So they've now made permanent this increase. So going forward, there won't be this confusion at the end of the year of can we buy more things if we've already spent. The amount used to be $25,000, and they've now made it permanent. There's not going to be this end of year confusion over what the limits are.
So it'll be $500,000.
It'll be $500,000 permanently unless they decide to change it. One other thing is to note about those limits is that for New Jersey, they don't recognize the federal limit. So if you take a $100,000 deduction in for federal purposes of Section 179, New Jersey only allows $25,000. And what happens is, as a result, you'll often have different depreciation levels for your assets for state purposes if you're a New Jersey-based business than you would for federal purposes. And while it may not seem like a big deal, it sometimes is confusing why New Jersey income is much higher than your federal income for tax purposes.
So the line that you have, assets must be placed in service by year-end, does that mean that the item needs to be purchased and in your possession or in operation as well?
So it actually doesn't. You have to purchase it, and you have to, in essence, take ownership of it. But as long as you put it into use in a short period of time after year end, you could acquire something and not receive it physically until a few weeks later.
Okay.
So I think we're going to talk a little bit about, if we go back to that previous slide, a little bit about bonus depreciation. So for companies that aren't able to take advantage of Section 179 election to expense for these type of assets, the other concept that was brought in was this bonus depreciation. And the idea of the bonus depreciation is for assets that are either reduced because you've taken part of it as a Section 179 deduction. The remainder, or an asset, if you choose not to use that, would naturally be deducted 50% in the first year. And this has been around for about 8 years now. And what they've done is, rather than make this permanent in addition to the Section 179 election, they have extended it for 2 more years and phasing it out after that in 2018 and 19. One planning issue around this is that with the new administration coming in, there's a lot of talk. Certainly Donald Trump has talked a lot about taxes and business practices. So there's a lot of speculation about what he might do. And he's being very ambitious about the initial 100 days of his presidency. But the reality is any tax law change that occurs is not likely to occur in the first 100 days. So I think for the year 2017, it's unlikely that a lot of tax law changes are going to be put into place for next year. The more likely scenario is 2018, when all of the congressmen are going to be up for re-election. That's more likely to be the time when significant tax law change could be implemented. And the discussion is around what Donald Trump would like to do is have a 15% flat business tax. And what the accounting industry is talking about is that would apply to any business, even a business that is taxed as a proprietorship now. The tax on that profit would be capped at 15%. Same as an S corporation. Anything that's not salary would be taxed at a flat 15%. So that is to be seen. My expectation is that would be for 2018, and time will tell if that's going to occur. But an S corporation planning opportunity would be to cap salaries and allow the excess to be taxed at a lower rate. So the planning opportunity for acquiring assets at the end of the year, which many companies utilize, the idea is to look at the next 12 to 18 months and determine what items that you have that will need to be replaced. So, or what items would you need to expand your business? And what I like to focus on is what benefit a particular item will bring to the organization. I don't think that just acquiring something for a tax write-off is a wise business choice. I think that the benefit you get in saving taxes needs to be met with additional business growth in the future, where you can use the tax savings toward growing and enhancing your business. So what you could do, look to the next 12 to 18 months, make a list of what things you might need, whether it be a large piece of equipment, whether it be upgrading your technology, whether it be trucks or vehicles that are used in the business, and look to get those in place before the end of the year. Any excess the one item that I didn't mention before, but it was noted on the slide, is that your Section 179 election to expense is limited to profits in the business. So if your business has $100,000 of profit, but you have $200,000 of assets, you're only allowed to expense up to the $100,000, but you can carry over the additional $100,000 to the next tax year and get the deduction at that time. So what many businesses also do is they will use leverage or debt financing to acquire something now where they don't necessarily have the cash to lay out, and then as they're paying that back, they'll get the immediate tax deduction for the whole amount, and they can use the extra cash flow to pay that off over time. And this does allow them to put things in place before they're actually able to save up the cash necessarily to do that. And sometimes that has a very favorable impact on a business to have those items up front. Some of the companies that are available for specifically equipment financing, there are many different companies that focus only on equipment financing. And what they will do, and they have very, many programs where they can close very rapidly and put the equipment into your name before the year is over. Now, I didn't list anything from a technology standpoint, Victor. What options are there? Lease options with technology that are available?
Sure. Many of our clients lease their equipment, and there's mainly two types of leases I've seen with our clients. The first one is your standard lease, that there's a small down payment, there's monthly payments, and it's a 3 to 5 year term with a $1 or fair market buyout. But the newest leases, which I've seen a lot of our clients select, is a perpetual lease. So let's say the last one we just closed in the fall is they bought $50,000 of computer equipment for 3 years. At the end of 3 years, as long as they continue to make those payments, they get another $50,000 so they can repurchase all their equipment. So instead of buying equipment that's only good for 5 years and it's old and obsolete, it's a perpetual lease. I don't know how it works out accounting-wise, but it works very well in terms of IT, because then you never have any obsolete equipment. You're always current, up to date, with the available support.
Well, that's very good to know, and that will also come into our discussion as we get further into the webinar about a capital budget and how to anticipate some of those 3 to 5 year replacement needs. So the next area I'd like to focus on for a little bit is the business tax credits. So there are a variety of business tax credits, and most of them are very specific. This is a partial list. There's probably 30 or more total tax credit that businesses potentially could take advantage of. Now, often these are very specific to a particular industry, around energy. Many of them are around energy. Many of them are around fuel sources, alternative fuels, but many more are also available to almost every business, and people aren't focused on it because it's really not something that is well known to business owners. And a lot of times companies will be going through their ordinary course and not really recognizing times at which you might qualify for a credit. And even when they're meeting with their accounting firms, I don't know that they spend a lot of time reviewing particular tax credits because many of them are so specific to different industries. So I've made a list of some of the more commonly applied tax credits. And what I like to do is, when I'm working with a company, is look at some of the activities that they're undergoing and just go through sort of a checklist of what things might be triggered in a tax credit so that we can remember to notify the CPA firm at the end of the year. So the first one's the research credit. And the R&D credit is very broad in terms. If you're creating a product or a product line, if you're investing, in some new innovation in your business, you might be able to take a tax credit for salaries of people that are working on that and many other costs related to that. And you don't need to be a biotech business to have research and development. Many established companies could have activities that qualify under the terms of this credit. Their work opportunity credit is for hiring people who've been out of work for a period of time. Some of these credits have time periods, and some of the time periods are after a year that was long ago. The empowerment zone employment credit, many people would be surprised to find out what a broad area the empowerment zones could be. They are designated by each state, and there's pretty large areas that qualify. New markets credit is different than the R&D credit, but if you're investing in a new market, you could have a credit available for that. One credit that people don't recognize that's available is the small employer pension plan startup. So if you're a company that employs less than 50 employees and you decide to put a pension plan in place, a 401k plan or something of that nature, simple plan, you can take a direct tax credit of up to $1,500 for the cost to establish that plan. Then I've listed a few others that are just interesting. I know that Linkai did take advantage of the alternative motor vehicle credit last year. You invested in a Tesla.
Okay.
That was a pretty substantial credit, I think.
Yeah, so $7,500. I believe it depends on, was it the weight class?
It's partly the weight class. It's partly the number of vehicles.
Yeah. Oh, and the kilowatts.
And the kilowatts.
The capacity of the Tesla as well, which is larger. So the company received $7,500 for tax credits.
Direct tax reduction. So, that the power of these are that it's not a deduction from income that would result in a fractional benefit. It's a dollar for dollar write-off of whatever the credit amount is. And even if it's a $1,000 credit or $2,000 credit, it could have, it's actual dollars that you won't have to spend on taxes. And that is entitled to you not for doing anything unique or unusual, but for just the general operation of your business. So this is something to look at. I would think each year you'd want to look at it at the end of the year and kind of reevaluate. And if you have somebody in the organization who becomes familiar with the opportunities and knows your business, they can look to the future and say, hey, if you're going to hire 3 people, why don't we hire them in this way and take a credit and get a tax credit for that? So it comes into play sometimes in planning if you're in tune with what opportunities exist.
So Greg, if we can go over, the purpose of the budget and more importantly, how to create a budget. I think every small business owner has, creating the budget is probably the hardest part to do.
So I think that I agree with you, and I think that many companies build a budget based on, let's take last year's numbers and see if we can do better than that. And I don't know that this is really serving their needs very well, because the basic purpose of a budget is, as I've listed here, you want to forecast the revenues, forecast the expenditures, not just from the past of what you've done, but really where you think it's going to fall in the new year. Many things change dramatically. In addition to health insurance, many other things change. Your sales team could change. You could be adding or expanding into a new market. So these things have to be anticipated and built into it. And then the other part of it that's really even more important is to then judge how you're doing throughout the year against what you've budgeted to see where you may be ending up, or where you may be exposed to risk for having overspent in an area that is not budgeted properly. So here's me. It's a diagram of myself describing to a board of directors the budget, and what I'm quoted as saying at the bottom is, now keep in mind that these numbers are only as accurate as the fictitious data, ludicrous assumptions, and wishful thinking they're based upon. So oftentimes it's a make-a-wish, and that's what the budget becomes. And I think the best way to do a budget is less of make-a-wish and more of let's look at where our sales are trending. Are our sales growing? Can we anticipate continued growth? Hopefully that's the case. Sometimes our sales are declining, and we need to adjust our spending to match where we're going to be in 6 and 12 months, or else we're going to spend ourselves right out of business. So you really need to focus on the trend. You probably want to also look at the trends and say, well, my busy season is from March to June. That's where the best part of my year comes. So you have to anticipate that in the budget and maybe account for different fluctuations like that throughout the year. You also want to look to, are we going to new markets? Do we have additional staff we're going to send out across different regions of the state or the country? Do we have new products that we can offer that we didn't offer before? So we're looking back at the 2016 sales and saying, oh, we're going to do about the same. And you may be forgetting about implementing a new product. You may be unsure of how much that product is going to produce in new sales and growth and new costs. It may not be as profitable as we anticipate. It may be more profitable. So some of these things are really going to set the tone for the remainder of the budget. What does it cost to go into a new market or to implement a new product? Can we get a tax credit for it? All these things are important questions to think about when constructing a relevant and usable budget. So once we have the sales refined to a point where we're comfortable that we feel like we have realistic numbers, then we begin building the remainder, the expense portion of the budget. The expense portion begins with items that are directly related to producing sales. It could be the cost of product, it could be the cost of labor related to product, and these items should be based on a profit margin that you've known or can determine from your experience over the past multiple years. And when you know that, there's going to be a certain amount of supplies, there's going to be a certain amount of other direct costs that as your sales grow, your costs are also growing. These items should be entered as a percentage of sales so that you can determine as you're going through the year if your sales are on target with the budget, are my margins on target with the budget? And that's something that you need to anticipate. Sometimes your building costs could be related to production. If you have a manufacturing operation and you have people working on a night shift, your building costs are going to be greater for electricity and heat than it would be if you have only daytime shifts. And you may have an allocation of equipment or repairs to equipment or building that's directly related to sales on an annual basis. So those are all the direct allocated costs that you want to create as ratios. Then you have your basic overhead costs. Now these should not grow from year to year, hopefully, with the exception of insurance and medical insurance. But generally, if you have a stable organization and you're not adding a significant workforce, your administrative costs should be relatively level from year to year. And the important thing here is to set a budget limit in these categories that will support your business but not create overspending. And you want to be able to hold your teams accountable to containing the spending of these types of costs to keep the operation running. You don't want to overspend in an area that is not revenue producing. Very often when I'm meeting with clients, we talk about different things that they're doing and things that they want to spend on, and sometimes they're looking to grow spending in an area that doesn't produce any revenue. It just adds to their overhead. And that becomes a discussion of, do we really want to make that type of investment? Sometimes there's a good reason, and sometimes the decision is changed for something else.
So Greg, is there any general percentage based on maybe the size or revenue of a company that they should look toward to keep their overhead costs?
Well, I think it varies by industry and by size. So larger organizations generally will have, a overhead that is a smaller percentage of overall sales. But what you really want to look for is how does your gross profit cover your overhead expenses? And I usually look at it the opposite way. I say, here are our overhead expenses. How much do we need in sales at our gross profit margin to cover our overhead expenses? And if it looks like it requires more sales than we're producing, then there's a serious issue with your overhead. I don't know that there's a standard that I could say 20% of your income should be overhead and no more. I don't think that is really a fair statement, because each business is very unique. And I think that some businesses overspend in general and administrative costs out of a sense of money's not an issue, we're doing really well, let's expand things, and let's have a weekly luncheon with everybody, and let's do some other things that maybe a business wouldn't. It's not really producing anything in the business that's beneficial other than additional costs. So not that lunch with everybody isn't beneficial. It could be a healthy thing to do to keep your team together, but you really have to evaluate it on a case-by-case basis. And my preference is definitely to make sure that the ratio makes sense between how much average monthly overhead you're going to have and how much pressure on sales and gross profit there is to cover that. So what I think is the most important part of any budget, I mean, building a budget is fine, but if you're not going to refer to it throughout the year, then the exercise is futile. If you get down to the most basic level of what a budget is, it's basically putting that cash aside in a envelope. And, you know, many years ago when technology didn't exist and banking was very different, people would have an envelope of cash, and they would take out of that envelope of cash money for bread, you know, and when they got paid, they'd put money into the different envelopes for food or for cost of rent or whatever they were paying for. And that was an original budget. When the envelope's empty, we can't spend anymore. Then we get a little bit more sophisticated, and we're looking at comparisons in worksheets from time to time, saying, "Oh, how did we do against what we budgeted for?" But the best way to do it is through accurate, detailed financial statements that are produced on a regular monthly basis. At least you want to review this quarterly and say, where are we sales year to date compared to what we projected? Where are our costs? Are our margins holding steady? And then do we have enough to cover our overhead each month? So I think that those comparisons are critical to having a useful budget. If you skip those parts, there's really no purpose in having a budget. If you just wait to the end of the year and look back at last year's and say, how did we do against last year's budget? And then, okay, let's make a new one that looks exactly the same. It's really not creating any benefit to your operation. So what's the difference? What's a capital budget? Often people will create a budget for the next year and say, great, I finished that task, I'm done. One thing that business planners do, and that you need to do when thinking about your own business, is develop a capital budget and decide, rather than living paycheck to paycheck or month to month with whatever money comes in and goes out through the business, really look and say, what's coming down the road that we need to anticipate and begin to reserve funds or begin to position ourselves so that we'll be financially ready to acquire those items when the time comes. Some of those are replacement costs. I have a machine, the machine is aged, we keep repairing it, but I know in 3 years that machine will run out and we'll need to replace it. That could have wide-ranging impact in your business. Where can you get the machine? Is it a printing press that we can get many of them from companies that have gone out of business recently? Is it a large piece of equipment used in manufacturing? Some of these things take many years to identify and not only buy, but then implement in your business. There could be a disruption. So you want to think of those things in advance. And I think at the end of the year, it's a good time to look at your business and look at where you want to be in 3 to 5 years and say, all right, do I need to begin cleaning up my debt portfolio so that I can pay off some debt now, that at the time when it's time to acquire this piece of equipment, I'll have the resources to do so.
Is there any relation between depreciation and like an estimate of replacing equipment?
There can be, and many times for non-tax purposes, you'll depreciate things basically on a straight line level. and you're anticipating that if you buy a piece of furniture, you're going to keep it for 10 years and you take a tenth of it each year, for example. That may or may not be true. And that may not be enough. That's something to look at for replacement, but you may decide to expand. You may say, I have space, I have so many people in my office, I can fit another 10 people. You may say in 2 years, I want to fill that extra 10 people spot, and I'll need desks, I'll need computers, I'll need, whatever tools they need to function. But also, we have existing technology or existing equipment that is going to run out of its useful life. Sometimes you can keep something for 12 years, sometimes it only lasts 6. So somewhere along that line you need to be anticipating. Sometimes you're looking at capacity, where if I had more capacity I could increase my sales exponentially. So if I added some technicians or some service providers, I could then go out and sell to that. But they need tools to do their job. And then you might be looking at a potential acquisition. You need to be financially prepared, looking at that and determining what implication that has to your business. So these are the items that are really significant to developing a capital budget that really is a living document that you maintain over time, and you keep going back to it saying, what's in this budget, and at what point in time do I have to be prepared to implement it. So these are some of the items that are often looked at for creating a capital budget. You may have vehicles, you might have service people out on the road that need a vehicle, machinery equipment in a manufacturing setting, large tools, which could be for many different businesses, construction companies, sometimes have to plan long in advance for tool replacement. Some tools only last a year or less, so you need to be prepared to replace them so that you can continue operating. And then there's office equipment, computer and hardware and software, like Victor mentioned a minute ago. These things become obsolete in 3 to 5 years. So if you're looking around your office and your computer equipment is more than 3 years old, you know that in short order, either Microsoft or Apple or are going to stop maintaining the platforms that you're currently operating under. So you have to anticipate these things and be prepared to migrate to newer, updated equipment. I went to a potential client who had a very nice, clean office, and they had a lot of new equipment, but they had one computer running Windows Vista. And their explanation to me was, well, we need that one to run the accounting software because the Windows 10 doesn't support our program. So you could also have technology issues or software issues that you really need to look to upgrade, and that could be quite expensive. So you need to anticipate that and set aside some funding for it. And then there's obviously leasehold improvements, building improvements, or building acquisition. You may decide I've grown to a level where I want to own my own facility and normalize those costs and create an investment for the future. So I've kind of gone through these things with the previous slide, but this is an example of an impact that you want to look at what impact positive or negative, will occur in your business. So if you can put more vehicles out in the field and have more service people operating them, you can generate an additional $50,000 a year in sales, perhaps. That's the kind of cost benefit that you're looking at for a return on investment, to say, okay, if I put these 3 vehicles, my sales will increase by $150,000. That's going to be very cost effective for my business and allow me to grow, and I may be able to grow beyond that. And the same down the line, you can save time, but create efficiencies. In the computer hardware and software, you can also look to those investments to protect your business from security issues, which we'll discuss a little bit later in the webinar.
Sure, we've been increasing our investment in the computer hardware and software the last few years, mainly as we expand for more capacity, more speed. Also, everyone wants the ability to work remotely now.
Right.
So every employee has the ability to work remotely. Everyone has the ability to take their phone either home or through a VoIP system. They can use their cell phones over Wi-Fi, receive their office calls, their tech queues, and especially security. Security is top of mind with everyone. We've been increasing our investment yearly in security, and we'll go over that as well.
And then there's financing issues related to a capital budget. Some companies have enough cash, fortunately, to make whatever investments are required. Other companies need to finance. They need to make sure that their credit rating is proper. They need to anticipate when these things happen and be ready. You don't want a situation to occur where you have too much debt and the banks won't lend any more to you, but you need a piece of equipment or something to operate your business, and it creates a negative drag on your company. And then you have the other option, which is always a popular discussion. Should I lease or should I purchase? The lease purchase discussion's gone on for as many years as I've been in accounting, and I think they'll go on for the rest of time. And it's just a question of ownership. It's a question of, do you want to constantly be paying money through a lease that becomes perpetual or can become a perpetual payment? And do you want to pay for what you're using and not what the total cost is? Or so there's arguments on each side that make sense, and what you really need to do is determine the cost benefit of each scenario. And each acquisition, each purchase of a large asset is unique and has a unique impact on your business, and needs to have a qualified analysis done to determine if leasing or purchasing is the better financial result. At the end of the slides, there is a link to a site where you can it'll help you calculate the benefit of lease and purchase. So you want to calculate your return on investment from these items. Is it the annualized profit from making an investment divided by the capital invested equals the return? You compare it to the interest rate on borrowed funds, which would be subtracted from this rate, to acquire the assets to determine what is the true benefit to the company. If it costs you more in interest to acquire it, maybe you don't have the right business need for that particular asset. With interest rates changing, although I think they're going to change so minimally over the next couple of years, but I do see them rising. it may be a good time to lock in some rates and take advantage of today's market. So some of the factors in the lease purchase: ownership, cash flow. You might have a lower payment on a lease. There's interest rates in either scenario. A loan interest rate is a stated interest rate, and a lease interest rate is imputed in the payments. They take the cost of the asset less what it's worth at the end of the lease term, and divide it by the payments and calculate an interest rate. Then there's depreciation factors. Section 179 comes into play. The bonus depreciation for tax purposes, the depreciation that you apply to your business for profit and loss, profitability calculations, and then financing options. You want to keep a strong business credit rating so that you can acquire financing when necessary to make investments in your business. Sometimes a bank loan for a particular asset, say a vehicle, truck, some sort, makes sense. You might get zero financing from a dealership, or you might decide that borrowing on a line of credit is better because you can pay that back at your own pace. Each scenario could be different. So the next thing we want to cover, we do have a few minutes left, is trends in cybersecurity. So here's a picture of me on the phone talking to my wife, where I say, I sent my bank details and social security number in an email, but I put private financial information on the subject line. It should be safe, right?
So Greg, what does cybersecurity have to do with technology and taxes?
So one of the things in the areas we've been discussing today are, basically planning for the future. And one of the main things in budgeting is you need to plan not only for opportunities but also for risks. And I think today, in today's climate, that the cybersecurity risks are so prevalent in everything we're doing. Everything is computerized. Every business has a technology exposure, and I wanted to include it in today's discussion so that we're accounting for what areas of technology expose us. So what I'd like to do now is really kind of ask you a few questions, Victor, and maybe
Sure.
we can cover these things quickly. Data breach methods. What are we seeing in the market today of data breaches? How are these things coming out?
Is email. So you hear the terms phishing, and it's affected every large private company. It's affected the government. They send you an email, and there's two types. One is targeted to you. So I'll say something to Greg, this week's payroll, and people go, oh, I'm in charge of payroll. I click on the Excel spreadsheet. It launches, it puts ransomware or some sort of malware on your computer, and then you're in serious trouble. The second one is they send you an email guessing that you have an American Express or a Chase card. The email looks exactly like an Amex or a Chase email would be. It'll say something to the effect, click here to verify your security, click here to change your password, and if you hover over those links, a lot of times they would point to a domain that you're not familiar with, another country, India, China, Middle East, Eastern Europe. The safest thing to do is if you receive one of those emails, don't click on any links. Go to AmericanExpress.com directly from a browser, log in, and you'll see the same message if it's legitimate.
So I got one of these emails this week, and I forwarded it to your team to double check, but I already had an inkling of what it was. it was Microsoft Exchange saying your Exchange password has changed. Please log on or it needs to be updated. Please log on and update it. Click here. And when I hovered over it, it was some company in England, and didn't make any sense to me. So I forwarded it here, and they verified for me that yes, this was malware, and that I should just delete it and not include it. But it is so prevalent that I think each of us gets multiple phishing requests every day. So tell me briefly, if you could, how can we secure our platforms? So how can we create a more secure environment internally?
Well, we've adopted the approach of perimeter and multi-layer defenses. So it always starts at the perimeter, which is where your firewall is. Every company, no matter what size, should have a commercial-grade firewall. They're very inexpensive compared to the risk that you're exposing yourself. Less than $1,000 will cover a company, up to 20 employees. These firewalls are not the firewalls of only a few years ago. The new term for a firewall is UTM, or Unified Threat Management. That means they actually check for malware, spyware, viruses. They'll check for content filtering right at the perimeter. So hopefully these devices or appliances will catch over 95%, because honestly, antivirus on a desktop is less than 50% effective now. If there's a virus, most of them are written to instantly disable or uninstall an antivirus, so you want to catch as much as the perimeter as possible. That said, we still recommend having an antivirus. That's the last line of defense on your desktop. You should keep your patches, which is both your Windows operating system and your third party like Adobe. Adobe is notorious for having holes and bugs. There's probably more Adobe patches in 1 year than all the other manufacturers put together. So you really want to be up to date on the Windows critical patches, your third party, your browsers, and that's a chore unless you have an automated system that we provide.
What about monitoring?
Monitoring is very important because even with the best of defenses, you may have malware, you may have hacking going along your network. It's important that you detect it as soon as possible so you can remediate it, block it, stop it. If you notice, like the Sony hacks, or the Target hacks, or the Home Depot, all those were discovered over a period of months. So it's very important. A period of months is a lot of damage, even for a big company, but for a small company, it's devastating. You want to catch it within hours or within days so you can stop it.
So I think we have one or two more slides that we can cover quickly. We can skip the cartoon. And
so I went over phishing, and we can, if someone has any questions, you can contact me directly. Botnet.
What are botnets?
So botnets are, again, they have to be put on your machine, your servers through, it could be phishing, it could be going to a bad website. A lot of legitimate websites have botnets embedded now. It could be a Facebook ad, so you really want to be careful. But once a botnet goes on your computer, it essentially takes over your computer. So it could be sending out spam. It could actually be using it to take down other websites, which is called like denial of service. That seems to be the trend lately. Really, you really want to prevent that or be notified as soon as possible. Antivirus, we already talked about, less than 50%. There's some Gartner studies that say it's less than 30%.
Wow.
But we still recommend it. It's part of a multi-layer defense. So everyone should have antivirus, but the firewall, the unified threat management, the content filtering. And whenever I say content filtering, a lot of owners, the first thing they do is, oh, I trust my employees. I want them to do, their work. I want them to be able to surf during their lunch. It's not a matter of trust. We're using content filtering as a security, really as another layer of security. So we'll block known malicious sites. So even if you want your employees to go to any site you want, you certainly want to block malicious sites. And that's really, content filtering can cut down on a lot of this malware or spyware, at least through the web browsing part. And then,
so the costs. The other item I wanted to cover was, as a business and with business risk, it appears that based on this IBM study last year, that the costs are more than doubling of a data breach. And one of the areas that you think about is, oh, we're gonna have to pay for somebody to clean up our equipment. We're gonna have to pay for, legal costs, and we're gonna have to pay for these other costs. These are all known costs that are directly related to it, but there's a lot of hidden costs that really you don't think about regarding the business risk of a breach. If you can go to the next slide, there's lost contract revenue. People hear you received a breach, they're going to not trust you to to provide the service, or you may not be able to provide the service. Your insurance premiums could increase if you have an insurance claim. It costs you more. Your credit rating will go down, and it'll cost you more money to raise debt. The impact of operational disruption, what happens to your employees, lost value of customer relationships. I think all of these hidden costs are not part of that IBM cost study that said it's doubled, and could have a devastating effect on a business. So what can we do? I think the things that Victor mentioned already.
Yeah, I think the only things we've talked about most of them, but the backup is critical, because sooner or later you may experience ransomware, malware. Ransomware is nearly impossible to eradicate properly. What we do is really, any files or folders are affected, we delete them, and then we restore from backup. And backup, it shouldn't be an afterthought. Backup should be an active part of your IT policy. We have clients who are backing up hourly. Here we back up every 4 hours. Backing up at night with old technology is just too much loss of productivity. To say, oh, we only lost 1 day's worth of work. For a small company, like we're 12 employees, that's 12 employees work product for 1 day. If you have a 50 person, that's 50. The cost of recreating that is huge compared to the cost of a backup solution. And then the other thing is really unique complex passwords. I can guess my customers' passwords probably 60% of the time. Always a mixture of children, pets. You should always change the passwords every 90 days, 180 days. We're really recommending something that's not on the slide, two-factor authentication when you start working remotely. We're going to offer it as a standard offering for our clients probably in mid-2017. Now it's an option. Two-factor just means when you log in remotely from home, from your phone, from your laptop, VPN, it goes beyond just username and password. We're going to ask for a 4-digit PIN that only you know, very much like a bank ATM card. And then we have a software program that goes on your mobile phone that uniquely generates, I believe it's a 15-character number every 30 seconds. So even if someone can guess your password, let's say they even guessed your PIN, unless they have physical possession of your phone as well, they won't be able to log in. And then training. something we're going to do in 2017 is offer training to our clients. Training, no matter what layers of defense products we do, training, because the hackers are always figure out a new method of trying to fool you. If employees are trained to recognize or say, hey, this looks a little fishy before I click on it, let me start asking some questions or ask my IT folks.
And that's it.
Yeah, here's some useful websites, and we have quite a few people on. I want to I unmuted the phones. If you have any questions for Greg or myself, ask them now. You could always email both of us as well if you have any questions. We'll collate all the questions and we'll send out the answers to everybody. I'll post it on my corporate Facebook page as well. So are there any questions? And again, right now, if there's not any questions, but it comes to mind, Victor@linkai.com, Greg at raw-cfo.com, and then we'll have this webinar also posted on our respective LinkedIn, Facebook pages probably within the next 2 business days. I want to thank everyone for attending, and thank you very much and happy holidays.